Let's talk about a voyage that literally changed everything. This wasn't just about finding a new sea route. Oh no, this was a journey fueled by a desperate, almost primal craving, and it ended up completely redrawing the map of the world. And you know, this whole thing kicks off with a promise that sounds, well, completely insane. Picture this: Vasco da Gama, standing before the King of Portugal, says this. I mean, wow. That one line tells you everything you need to know, right? The insane ambition, the raw obsession, and the terrifying life or death stakes.
So, what was the big deal? Why risk everything? What could possibly drive an entire continent to sail off the edge of the known world? Well, it all boils down to something surprisingly simple: a desperate, gnawing hunger for flavor.
You really have to put yourself in their shoes. Think about 15th century Europe. The food was, let's be honest, it was terrible. Everything was bland, boiled meat, or so heavily salted you could barely eat it. It was just about survival. But they'd heard whispers, legends, about a magical place half a world away, India, a place with a treasure trove of spices that could transform this depressing mush into something incredible. We're talking black pepper, cloves, cinnamon. These weren't just seasonings. They were like magic dust, a complete revolution on a dinner plate.
So easy, right? Just go get some. Well, not so fast. There was a huge problem. The land route to this paradise, it was basically a locked door. You had Arab traders who controlled the whole business, and they were selling spices for literally the price of gold. And even if you could afford it, blocking the way was the powerful Ottoman Empire, a massive, impassable wall standing right between Europe and everything it craved.
Okay, so if the land route is a no-go, what's left? Only one other option, and it was an option so terrifying, so completely unknown that most people thought it was just a suicide mission, a one-way ticket to a watery grave. We're talking about the open ocean.
You know, it's kind of hard for us to wrap our heads around this today, but for sailors back then, the fear was real. They genuinely believed in giant sea monsters that could swallow ships whole. And even worse was this horrifying idea that if you sailed too far out, you just fall off the edge of the world into nothing. The ocean wasn't just water. It was a hungry, cruel killer.
And look, they had every reason to be terrified. This wasn't just superstition. Just 10 years before our story, another Portuguese explorer, a guy named Bartolomeu Dias, gave it a shot. He actually made it all the way to the southern tip of Africa. But then he ran into a storm so violent, so unbelievably apocalyptic, that it just broke him. His courage completely shattered. He named the place the Cape of Storms and literally fled for his life, turning right back around to Portugal.
So after Diaz failed so spectacularly, the King of Portugal realized something. He didn't just need a good sailor. He needed a different kind of man entirely. Someone stubborn, someone ruthless, someone fanatical. A man who simply would not break. And that man was Vasco da Gama. He had a reputation for being exactly the kind of iron-willed man that Diaz, well, wasn't.
And boy, was da Gama's will put to the test right away. The journey was an absolute living nightmare. I'm talking waves as high as 10-story buildings crashing down on them. Then came the scurvy, this truly horrific disease where your gums rot and your teeth literally fall out of your head. The ship basically became a floating coffin. The despair was so complete, so overwhelming, that his crew finally cracked. They staged a full-blown mutiny, begging him, pleading with him to just turn back.
So how did da Gama respond to this mutiny? He did something absolutely unthinkable. He gathered all of his precious navigational instruments, the only things that could get them home, and he threw them overboard, into the sea. And then he gave his crew this chilling ultimatum. He sealed their fate. It was a crystal clear message. We have no way to return. We either reach India, or this sea will be our collective grave. No more talk of going back.
And here's the crazy part. It worked. Against all possible odds, they survived. They finally rounded that Cape of Storms and sailed into a brand new body of water, the Indian Ocean. And there, in a place called Malindi on the African coast, they got a lucky break. They met an expert local navigator, a man who knew these waters like the back of his hand, and he agreed to guide them the rest of the way.
Imagine this. After months and months of smelling nothing but salt, sweat, sickness, and death, one morning a totally new scent drifts across the water. It's this divine, intoxicating aroma of sandalwood, cardamom, and black pepper. They didn't even have to see land to know they'd made it. They had smelled their treasure. They had arrived. Calicut, on the coast of what we now call Kerala, India.
And what happens next is this incredible, almost comical clash of two completely different worlds.
Da Gama gets brought before the local king, the Zamorin of Calicut. And the Zamorin is sitting on a solid gold throne, dripping with silk and heavy diamond jewelry. And the gifts from the mighty king of Portugal? Get this, some wool hats, a few brass pots, and barrels of honey. I mean, the Indian court could barely keep from laughing out loud. But in a remarkable show of grace, the Zamorin followed custom and welcomed these strange, worn-out sailors from the sea.
So, Da Gama eventually sails back to Portugal, his ship stuffed to the brim with precious spices. And what happens when he gets there isn't just a successful business trip. No, it was an economic earthquake, one that sent shockwaves across the entire globe.
Okay, get ready for this number. The profit from that one single horrifying voyage was 60 times the original investment. Let me say that again. 60 times. That's a 6,000% return on investment, even after paying for the ships and the crew, including the ones who died. It was a number so insane, so unbelievable, it was like they hadn't just found spices, they'd found a mountain made of pure gold.
As you can imagine, that news spread across Europe like wildfire. Everyone was thinking the same thing. If a small, kind of struggling country like Portugal could get that rich overnight, what's stopping us? Suddenly, Spain, Holland, France, Britain, every major power was scrambling to get their own ships in the water. The great race to India had officially begun.
But here's the thing. The route that Vasco da Gama blasted open, it wasn't just a highway for spices. It became a gateway for something much, much darker. And this story of discovery very quickly turns into a story of conquest.
It was like Da Gama opened the floodgates. First, more Portuguese ships came pouring in. Then came the Dutch, then the French, and finally the British. And each wave was bigger than the last, with more ships, more soldiers, and way more ambition.
Remember that gracious welcome from the Zamorin? That was quickly betrayed. Those friendly little trading posts they set up, they slowly morphed into heavily armed military forts. Pretty soon, cannons were doing the talking instead of diplomats. The European powers got really good at pitting local Indian kingdoms against one another, turning a peaceful coast of trade into a bloody battlefield. And this was the start of centuries of colonial loot, slavery, and brutal occupation. And this really forces us to reframe this entire story, doesn't it? The idea that Vasco da Gama discovered India, it just doesn't sit right. You could argue the world didn't see the real, unconquerable spirit of India when a sailor landed in 1498. No, the world saw it on August 15, 1947, the day India finally broke the chains of colonialism and stood up as a free nation.
So let's end with this thought. Look, there is no denying this voyage changed the world, absolutely. But it also leaves us with a really fundamental question. Vasco da Gama found a path on the water, a route for ships. But can you truly discover a country that was already, for centuries, a beacon of civilization, a global center of trade, wealth, and culture? It's a question that makes you rethink the entire age of discovery, isn't it?